There are certain foods that we're going to teach you to remove during the reset program, and that's because these are foods that are known to cause increased inflammation and trouble in your gut and in your whole body. They cause symptoms, including digestive issues, but also inflammatory responses in your skin or in your joints and muscles. They cause fatigue and brain issues and even headache. So I want to talk to you and make sure that you understand which foods are those foods that are identified as inflammatory foods. Because as you complete the reset program and you're adding back things, I don't want you to get in a habit of adding back long after you're finished with the reset program. So we're going to learn about inflammatory foods. To begin with, let's talk about trans fats. These are known to produce inflammation, and they can be found in all kinds of processed foods. Basically, so many processed foods, anything that is sweet and tastes good in your old way of living, things like cakes and cookies and bagels and crackers and all those trans fats. Read the label, find the trans fats, and know that that's a no-no, not only now during the reset program, but later on as well, because that just leads to chronic inflammation. Refined sugars are the second thing that are in the inflammatory food category. So these are just pervasive in everything we're eating today. Also, read the labels just really carefully and look for things to avoid, like high fructose corn syrup, corn sugar, corn syrup, and sucrose. Those are no-nos. Mess with your insulin levels and your glycemic index and produce a high level of inflammation. So let's go in to talk about high glycemic response foods. These foods also create blood sugar spikes after you eat them, and they stress the body to overproduce insulin, which isn't healthy, and that overall leads to increased inflammation. So these high glycemic response foods are refined grains and breads and desserts and sweet beverages and highly processed prepared foods. Rice and bananas, while these are included in the reset program, they also, though, do have a high glycemic impact. So eat them just sparingly, okay? You don't want to overdo the rice and bananas because those will cause a sugar spike and overproduce insulin. Foods that have high omega-6 oils, like corn or soy, these tend to also produce a high level of inflammation. So be careful to avoid those during the reset program and then long after. So we want to make sure that we avoid things with high omega-6 oils. It is well known and well supported in the literature that things containing gluten found in wheat, rye, barley, spelt, and kamut. These gluten-containing grains can be highly inflammatory and destructive on the lining of the gut. So we want you to pull all this gluten out during the reset program. And while we're going to invite you to add it back and test your tolerance, some of you are going to find that you will not return to gluten. And I'm afraid that in years to come, the evidence is going to be mounting that's just going to discourage people from using gluten at all, because it seems to be negatively affecting the gut and just really maybe contributing to this overall increased inflammation in our population today. The next thing that leads to chronic inflammation that's in our diet are those saturated animal fats, particularly from grain-fed red meats. So while we're going to be eliminating beef from the reset program, we're going to be allowing you to have bison and other things, particularly grass-fed. So when you check your tolerance for red meat and reintroduce beef in the end, remember that grass-fed is going to be the way to go, because grain-fed red meats are known to be highly inflammatory. Okay. Dairy-containing foods, anything, milk products, yogurt, cheeses, butter, anything like that in large amounts causes inflammation chronically for people, depending on your sensitivity to dairy. And you'll learn, as you reintroduce dairy after the reset program, you'll learn if you are lactose intolerant or not. But even for the long term, large amounts of dairy-containing foods can lead to chronic inflammation. The last thing to consider is the temperature at which you cook foods and the temperature at which you use fats. So the higher the temperature, the higher the likelihood that you're going to be creating these inflammatory compounds in the food. So we recommend, cooking with fats and oils at lower temperatures, or even getting into slow cooked meals in a crock pot or something like that to avoid that high temperature reaction that occurs with certain fats that produces might be tasty fried foods, but in the long run creates a negative inflammatory response in your body. So I hope this was helpful to help you understand how food affects inflammation, and pay attention to those things by removing them now in your reset program and perhaps keeping away from them for the long term.